All right, so I want to show you what it looks like when you use Leto to automate a complex task rather than just spitting out files to your project configuration, which is also useful. But I find this kind of something that other tools might not be able to do in such a complete and language agnostic way. So something that I do really often and I find tedious is taking a Node.js Express server and adding a new view, just because there's a lot of tidbits that have to be done and little files that need to be touched to get things working. So what I'm going to do is walk you through what it takes to do that manually, and then I'm going to show you what it would look like to build a Leto template out of it. And I'm not going to try to write it in front of you. I'm going to kind of copy it from a template that I've already built, but if you'd like, you're welcome to go to the GitHub organization Leto templates and look at the templates as I go and kind of play along, I suppose. So here we have our server, and let's think about what we would do to add a new script. First of all, kind of at the lowest level, we're going to need to be spitting some HTML into the page for the user on the client side. So this project configuration, which is kind of my preferred server technology stack, I use Backbone to do client-side stuff. So I've got some templates and some JavaScript that need to be created. So a view will typically have kind of an HTML template in my case. Some people use Jade or some other templating engine. So I've got an HTML template for each view. I've got a JavaScript file that does kind of extensions of model view stuff and allows my client-side code to know what to put actually on the page. And so I need to generate those two files. Then I also need to go into the pre-existing files like main.js and add references to them and add functions that actually go and call the functions that would render the page or add them to lists. And just basically I need to do a bunch of housework to keep the application's knowledge of the view complete and make sure it actually gets onto the client's page into the browser. So great. So we've got HTML. So let's write this stuff down. So the first thing we might need to do is add an HTML template. And the second thing is add a JavaScript, I don't even know, view extension. So yeah, because we need to extend backbone.view. So the next thing we might need to do is, so let's see, in main.js, the three things we need to do, I think, are add something to our routes list up here, add a function to actually do the I guess, rendering, and add a reference down here to our HTML template. So let's just group those together as modifications. Main.js. So we need to change a bunch of stuff in main.js. Then we also need to add a reference to our script in index.html. So add script reference in index.html. And then, okay, I think at that point we're done with the client side. On the server side, we need a routing function, we need a routing function that is reference from the server that will actually handle the actual server-side HTTP request and respond with appropriate data. It doesn't really matter what it responds with. It just matters that we have all of the kind of hooks in place so that we can start doing actual programming. So that's what we're trying to automate. So, great. Let me show you what this does now, and then we can go from there. So you can see in the prompt here, I just spawned a server that already has, well, I won't go into that quite yet. So let's spawn some views. So Leto spawn view name contact name woot, and so you can see this is obviously, you can do this ad nauseum. There's no trouble. For overhead, I can't think of page names, so there we go. Just added 3 new pages to the site. You can see that in server.js, we've added references to these router functions. And if we go to router.js, we've got server-side routing that does actual response to the client in JSON. It doesn't respond with anything, but that doesn't matter now because the hooks are in place for us to do creative programming. We've added some HTML templates for the client side. We've added some JavaScript. There we go. Contact. Woot. And then we've also added references in main.js. All of these new hooks here. So as you can see, this automates all of the basic tasks that would be done manually and saves us a bunch of time. And obviously on a single day, you might not spend a ton of time in doing this, but over time, it's great to get it out of the way. So what does this look like if we were actually to look at the procedure that we give Leto, right? So let me just kind of make one as by copying from a pre-existing one. So, and explain it along the way. So the way to start a new configuration or new project for Leto is Leto init, and that's going to spit out a blank configuration file in the folder. And then we can just go right to the procedure. And in a previous video, I've kind of walked through the replace step, which does batch search replace. But for this, we don't really need that. We need to be able to generate some files for the HTML view template and the JavaScript. And then we need to be able to change a bunch of existing files in ways that are kind of more powerful than search replace would be. So we have two rules that are specifically for that. One is called template, which generates files from explicit templates. Basically, you put some text in a file format called .tpl, which is specific to Maker, which is kind of part of the Leto dependency chain. And these Maker templates let you speak directly in the Leto markup language, and let me show you what one of those might look like. So we need to create this, generate this HTML template, right? So it doesn't really matter what's in there, but you can see that here's an example .tpl file, and we're allowed, because we're speaking directly in the markup language, we can just put raw HTML, and then right in the middle, we can have these parameters that are sitting here. And when a user comes around and actually tries to spawn a new project with this, or automate tasks, then they will fill out the name parameter, or it will be left to whatever the default is, and the template will be kind of filled out as necessary. So this is just to demonstrate that everything in these files, the contents of them, is dynamic because they're in markup language. Similarly, when we're going to set up the procedure for this, well, we don't need a title, but basically the way you would set this up for some templates is you create a directory of templates, and Leto, when it's going to spawn the step, will load that directory, pull in the templates, and allow you to use them. So let's try and fill out this procedure. So the first thing we're going to do is try to generate these files, so we need a template step. A required block in the template step is the source directory, which is this folder of templates. So let's say we were going to make a new directory called... So let's say we're going to make a new directory right in our project folder, let's say, called Leto. And in that, we're going to have some templates. And you know what, actually it's not worth me going through and typing all this. So basically we're gonna have a folder, we're gonna be able to load these templates, and we're gonna have something like this for the HTML view, and then we're gonna have something that looks like this, vue.js.tpl, for the JavaScript file. And it's very simple, they're both kind of slave to this name, and they do whatever they need to do, register this function to the window, and then override it, override the backbone view stuff, and great. So let's actually use these templates now, like so. So we're going to load our empty view template, and we're going to spit it out as whatever the name is, view.html. So you can see the output parameters, and actually most of the stuff in this configuration file can also be slave to this to user input, and is very configurable in that way. So great, now we've generated those two files, and you can see we're going to put them in public template whatever.html, public JS views whatever.js, and that's exactly where they would go in the normal project directory. So next, after we've generated these files, we need to add references all over the place. So in order to change a file in place, there's another step type called change. So let's make one of those. So the way change works is each of your files is fed through changer, which is another dependency like maker. Changer will analyze your file line by line and feed it through rules that you write. And these rules are basically just JavaScript functions that will either, that are basically passed the text of the line and asked to return whatever they would like to return. So they're allowed to modify the text of a file based on whatever code you write in the rule. So at launch of Leto, there's going to be a whole bunch of rules that are built into Changer, and I use one of them in this, but I'm going to, I guess, kind of briefly show you what it looks like to make your own rule. And to do that, I actually did it manually for these templates. So the first thing we might want to do is add a UI side routing function to render a view. So this is like, well, actually before that. So I've got my change rule type, and then I've got to load my rules. So let's say in our Leto folder, we're going to have a file called rules.js, and rules.js will look like this. So here we have one rule, and we're exporting the rule insert after finding, and it's going to expose the two default parameters of a Leto rule, and then we're going to define our own custom 3 here. And all you need to do to define them is just declare them, and you're allowed to pass whatever arguments to these rules you want, and that'll be. I don't expect you to understand that yet, but you'll see later. So every rule is passed the line number that's currently being processed and the text of that line. And then you can do whatever you want, and eventually you return some text. So what we're doing here is we're saying, if we want to find some line, and once we find that text, some number of lines after, we want to insert some string. And so this is the logic to do that. And if you check out the code online at the GitHub organization Leto templates, you can find this and check out kind of how it's built in more detail. So great, we're going to use this insert after finding to allow us to put markers all over the server and client-side code, find those markers with the rules, and insert code after them. So that's how all of this works, and that's how it's all language agnostic. We just put these markers in, and it's as simple as allowing Leto to do search replace and add them, or not search replace, but to search through the files and add them after, add whatever we want after. Cool. So where was I? So let's go back to our rule here. We've declared our rules, and now we're going to actually go into our list of changes that we're going to make. And this is an array, and we can do as many as we like. So the first thing we might do is let's add a UI side router function to render a view. So this, if you recall from main.js, this is adding one of these functions here to do a bunch of the client-side logic. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to run this insert after finding rule, and we're going to process the file main.js. We don't have to specify any line numbers because we're just going to allow the rule to run on the entire file. And we're going to look for Leto marker router functions, which you will find here, Leto marker router function. So it's going to know to insert itself right after, or insert the code right after there. I think it's actually the default of 1 line after there, yes. And we're going to pass in some arguments. So we're passing in the marker to look for, and then the text to replace it with. But you can see that this router function is actually in markup language. We're using the Leto markup. So router function is a variable that's going to be filled in by user input, or we can manually put externals to be loaded. And so let's do that. Externals allow you to load, so we're going to put this outside of our procedure. Externals allow you to load some text as from whatever file you want as a template, and basically treat it directly as markup language. So here we might have, inside of our Leto directory, we might have a folder called snippets, which would have routerfunction.txt and route.txt. And just to give you an idea of what those might look like, here is the snippet of a router function, and this is, as you can see, heavily dependent on whatever the name ends up being. And this is just a way to kind of get text easily templated and load it and pass it along into our procedure here. So great. We've pulled some text out, and we can do that. Here we can insert, now we can insert some hooks and references into main.js by, I'm talking while I'm trying to copy paste stuff. So here we go. We're going to insert a hook for UI side router function and reference the local HTML template. So these are the other two changes inside of main.js that we're going to make. And you can see that this time, instead of adding external string contents from like one of these externals, we can just actually use some string that we define right there. And we can still make that dependent on some user input. And so, again, this is just kind of me hammering home the point that all of this stuff is very dynamic and can be completely dependent on stuff that you can make these templates as flexible and as powerful as you like, and as dependent on user input as you like. So similarly, after this, we can, we can just keep doing this. I guess I'll just copy the rest of them all at once. Here we have step 2. We're going to insert a script tag for the new script inside of index.html. Here we're inserting a reference to the router function inside of server.js. Here we are inserting the route snippet here that I guess I can show you now, which is the second file that we reference from our externals block. So this is what that looks like. And again, this is server-side code to do the actual responding to the client. And I've written this code so many times that I was able to just pull the boilerplate code from one of my other projects and plop it into one of these snippets, and then I never have to think about it again. Well, after I modified it a little bit to make it ready to be templatized. So there we go. At this point, this is a working procedure. We could spawn these views ad nauseum into a pre-marked server template. So basically, what I like to do is I take my Express workflow. I've built enough Express servers that I have some kind of ideas about how my boilerplate projects should look and how I like to put them together. For instance, I use HTML templates instead of Jade and whatever. So I crystallize that, and then I start figuring out stuff that I really don't like to do, like adding a view or adding a new database or adding a new model. And so I've got templates for all of these different various tasks, and it allows me to build and modify sites very quickly and be more productive. I really think that I get a lot out of it. So I hope that this interests you and you can try to get some benefit out of it. I don't know. Have fun, guys. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.